Tvam Yunarda Niranu Kroshaha without compassion. Balanam of the innocent, inexperienced boys. Mati bit, contaminating the consciousness. Arehe of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Parshada Matye among the personal associates. Chadasi travel. Yashaha defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nirapatrapaha although you do not know what you are doing. You are executing sinful activities without shame. So, translation. Prajapati Daksha continued, thus committing violence against other living entities and yet claiming to be an associate of Lord Vishnu, you are defaming the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You needlessly created a mentality of renunciation in innocent boys, and therefore you are shameless and devoid of compassion. How could you travel with the personal associates of the Supreme Lord? So, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This mentality of Prajapati Daksha still continues even today. When young boys join the Krishna conscious movement, their fathers and so-called guardians are very angry at the propounder of the Krishna conscious movement because they think that their sons have been unnecessarily induced to deprive themselves of the material enjoyments of eating, drinking, and merrymaking. It's an interesting word. We don't use that word anymore, actually. Karmis, fruitive workers, think that one should fully enjoy his present life in this material world and also perform some pious activities to be promoted to higher planetary systems for further enjoyment in the next life. A yogi, however, especially a bhakti yogi, is callous to the opinions of this material world. He is not interested in traveling to the higher planetary systems of demigods to enjoy a long life in an advanced materialistic civilization. As stated by Prabhupada Saraswati, Kaivalyam Narakayate Judasya Purakasya Pushpayate. For a devotee, merging into the Brahman existence is hellish, and life in the higher planetary systems of the demigods is a will-o'-the-wisp, a phantasmagoria with no real existence at all. A pure devotee is not interested in yogic perfection, travel to higher planetary systems, or oneness with Brahman. He is interested only in rendering service to the personality of Godhead. Since Prajapati Daksha was a karmi, he could not appreciate the great service Narada Muni had rendered his 11,000 sons. Instead, he accused Narada Muni of being sinful and charged that because Narada Muni was associated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord would also be defamed. Thus, Daksha criticized that Narada Muni was an offender to the Lord, although he was known as an associate of the Lord. So, evam tvam niranukrosho valanam mattivedarahe varshadamadye charasi yashoha nirapatrapaha. So, Omagana Tivadandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chaksuram Meditam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. So, Prabhupada's comments in the purport are very topical, or were topical at that particular time. Topical means was dealing with a topic that was very much prominent in the Krishna conscious movement when Prabhupada wrote the purport. And that topic that was very much prominent in the Krishna conscious movement began with something called deprogramming. Deprogramming was a process by which devotees were kidnapped legally. So usually kidnapping is not legal, which devotees were kidnapped legally, taken and locked up somewhere, and there was an attempt, sometimes by psychologists, trained psychologists, to convince the devotees that they were missing out on the real value of human life, which is merrymaking, as Prabhupada says there. And I remember several of these different deprogramming activities. Once upon a time, I was temple president in Miami, and one of the young girls was kidnapped, and she was initiated, actually kidnapped from the temple and taken to her home, and we found out, I mean, I thought I would counteract it, I thought I was a big detective or something. Anyway, so I thought I would counteract it by tracing out where she was, and if we found out where she was, and so myself and the other devotees, we camped out in a van parked across the street from her house. And we just hid below the windows, just like, so no one would discover we were there. And we were thinking that as soon as she stepped out of the house or whatever, we would just like grab her and put her in the van and bring her back to the temple. Of course, it wasn't successful. But there were many instances like that. In fact, even in my own experiences with my parents, because these kidnappings were done in cooperation with parents. The parents would declare that their child had been either taken against their will, or their child was not of sound mind, and they got something called a conservatorship. Conservatorship means that if you declare, let's say if I declare one of my disciples to be completely incompetent, I could run their lives for them, and that would be nice. So anyways, and they would listen to me for the first time in their lives. But anyway, so that's what they did. They went to the government, lawyers, and everything like that, and they declared that your son, or the son, he really is not competent to take care of himself. Therefore, you have a conservatorship, and you're hiring some lawyers. And the way they would kidnap people was really terrible. Sometimes the devotee would be on Sankirtan, and they'd pull up in a van, 3 or 4 thugs would just like push the poor girl or boy into the van. Ah! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And then they put a gag on the mouth. Don't chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And then they take you to a hotel or somewhere where the person could be found, locked you in a room, and basically didn't let you sleep for several days. And you can really influence someone's mind if you don't let them sleep. They just become a little crazy. And then they would offer them meat, and if it was a boy, they'd bring a really pretty girl in front of them. The brahmacharis. Hi. And, they were tempted different ways, and really kept the person locked up. It was really horrendous. In most cases, the persons did escape. How they usually escaped, I don't know, there's some interesting stories. They would go to the bathroom and go out through the tiny bathroom window and run down the street, and sometimes without clothes on, because, they were really controlling them, and then call the devotees, you got to pick me up, I'm escaping. And then sometimes the devotees would just send them to India to get away from their parents and things like that. So even of course, I wasn't actually brainwashed. Unfortunately, my brain is still dirty; it needs to be washed. But anyway, so what happened? One time, I went home to visit my father, and my father said to me, "I want to introduce you to one of my friends. He's a nice psychiatrist." And so I was sitting down, in the living room, talking to the psychiatrist. My father said, "Oh, I got to go away now. I'll be back in a few days. No, I'll be back in a few hours." So he goes away and leaves me alone with the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist is asking me questions, normal questions like, "Why did you join the Krishna conscious movement?" And, I wasn't speaking fanatically. I just said, well, I realized that I want to have a spiritual goal of life. and realize God and serve God. He said, all right. He said, another question, are you happy? And I said, are you happy? And by the time we were finished, the psychiatrist didn't know whether he was crazy or I was crazy. So I didn't get deprogrammed. So Prabhupada himself was a little, I don't want to use the word fearful, but had some trepidation. That means some anxiety. That if he came to America, he'd be kidnapped. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. But still, you know, because Prabhupada's parents weren't around to kidnap him and to try to deprogram him. And Prabhupada's parents were devotees anyway. So Prabhupada was thinking that they'll want to kidnap me if I come to the United States. I mean, things were getting so heavy. And then there was a declaration that Krishna consciousness is just like a modern cult. Actually, the word cult is interesting because it's not necessarily, you look it up in the dictionary, it's not necessarily pejorative or a negative word. It can indicate any group of people. You know, like
culture.
Yeah, well, not necessarily a culture. It indicates a group of people, a small group of people, which, you know, you could say the Mormons are a cult. They probably are. Anyway, and so, and then, but it's used mostly in a negative sense. You know, it's a cult. It's a cult. You know, there's different cults. Like you have the Rotary Club International, and you have political parties, right? They're different cults. So, but anyway, so then Krishna consciousness there was a whole legal fight because they hired even some academicians, that means people in the academy, you know, university professors, to declare this is just something that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami made up to just steal the youth. It was something like the Pied Piper, you know, Pied Piper. He played a flute and anyway, took all the kids away. It was good because they didn't pay their debt to him. There's a whole story. Maybe I should tell the story of the Pied Piper. Anyway, some of you may remember. So what happened is that there was accusations, and our whole legal status was being threatened. The whole movement was being threatened because of these declarations. You know, this is just some cheating thing that somebody has made up. And so there was a big court case in New York. Big court case in New York. And there was one devotee, Adi Keshava, who was sannyasi at that time. And he was the one who was actually the main focus of that court case, you know, because they declared in New York that he was just like taking people away from the parents and everything. And so Prabhupada gave him the strategy. He said, the strategy to defend yourself in court is really easy. He says, before the court case begins, you take every single one of my books, Prabhupada's books, bring them to the judge and say, you have to read all of them. You have to read all the books, all the pages, you know, so poor judge, not poor judge, you know, the fortunate judge. Talk about book distribution. And so the judge, poor judge, had to sit and read every page of the books that were published at that particular time. You know, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita was published. So he basically pretty much knew our philosophy by the time of the court. So he started the court case, it lasted a few seconds. He said, I declare this movement is bona fide. And then Prabhupada, when he read, there was a newspaper article about this, and when Prabhupada read this, he said, now my mission is successful. Because I've been accepted as a bona fide spiritual process, path, religion in America, legally. And this was really important, this court battle. And devotees were really ecstatic when Prabhupada won it, or the movement won this court battle. So this is pretty similar to what was happening during the Daksha times. And so this story sort of repeats in many different ways. And one example of that is the story of Raghunath Das Goswami. You know, Raghunath Das Goswami was born in a very wealthy family, and his parents wanted him to enjoy the way wealthy parents want their children to enjoy, which is sense gratification. Opulent life, sense gratification. They even thought, we'll keep him happy at home by giving him a nice wife, wealth, whatever he wants. And he was also very educated and quite proficient in politics and proficient in money dealing and everything like that. So he even was able to arrange that his father and uncle didn't go to jail when there was some accusation, because his father and uncle were keeping too much. They were tax collectors, and they were keeping too much of the taxes. In those days, actually, the tax collectors actually kept a proportion of the taxes when they were collecting it. I don't think that happens now, does it? They just work for the government and get a salary. So it's actually a good idea to give them a portion of the taxes, because that way they'll be more enthusiastic to get more taxes for the government, right? That's called incentive, right? If someone, like a salesman, he gets a certain percentage of whatever he sells. And so, of course, in Krishna consciousness, we don't need to take a certain percentage of the books we sell. Our incentive is Krishna's mercy. But there should be an incentive. That incentive is Krishna's mercy, or at least the devotees cheering us after the Sankirtan marathon. Joy, you're a hero. So anyway, so he was able to negotiate this whole settlement with the Muslim government. Very, very expert person. And when he met Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was so, of course he's an eternally liberated soul. Sometimes eternally liberated souls take birth in certain families where they don't appear to be eternally liberated, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But anyways, this is Yogamaya. So as soon as he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he just thought, I gotta get out of here. I gotta join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had advised him, don't act foolish. Don't keep trying to escape from home. Because every time he tried to escape from home, his parents had deprogrammers to bring him back, guards. They just brought him back. So he was just like 24/7 surrounded by these guards. You couldn't even leave the house without permission. It's pretty interesting. The original deprogramming. So then Lord Chaitanya advised him just to act normally, like a pounds, shillings, and pence person. So not to arouse suspicion, so his guards would let down their guard. And later on, he got the mercy of Lord Nityananda to be able to escape from home. And there was that famous Panihati festival that he sponsored and served all the Vaishnavas. And Lord Nityananda forcibly put his feet on the head of Raghunath Das. Pretty interesting, isn't it? That he was feeling very humble. When he approached Lord Nityananda just dragged him there and stuck his feet on the head. That's how merciful Lord Nityananda is. And when that happened, after he sponsored, then by getting Lord Nityananda's mercy, he was able to escape from his home eventually. By a trick, one of his gurus, Yadananda Acharya, came and said, my disciple has neglected the deity worship, and Raghunath Das, this is in the middle of the night, Raghunath Das said to his spiritual master, I'll take care of it, and instead of taking care of it, he left home. So the spiritual master was in on this whole trick too, obviously. Get him out of his home. And then he went to Jagannath Puri to join Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But his parents still didn't give up, because they sent him money and men. And the whole idea was not only so he should be comfortable while he was living in Jagannath Puri, but he would again become enamored by this material energy. He wasn't enamored, but they were thinking like that. So in the same way, when one renounces this material world, Prabhupada said, it's like declaring war on Maya. Pretty heavy, isn't it? When one takes sannyas. Okay, Maya, let's see the best you can do. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said declaring war on Maya. So anyway, so what happened is that his parents were sending this money. Of course, he sent the money back, and eventually, he accepted some of the money to host Chaitanya Mahaprabhu every month for prasadam. And eventually, he realized even that was contaminating, and he stopped doing that. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Swarup Damodar Goswami, why isn't Raghunath Das inviting me anymore for prasad? And then Swarup Damodar Goswami explained that he wasn't taking the money from his parents anymore. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that's very good because basically when you accept something from non-devotees for your own personal sense gratification or even your personal service, not for the movement. Obviously, we accept so much money from people who are not Krishna conscious for the movement, that there is some association like that. This is a subtle law of nature, the law of association. Just like I was listening to a class of one devotee was giving a class, it was a little while ago, and the devotee said, now that we are more advanced in Krishna consciousness, we don't have to be so careful about eating in restaurants run by people who are not Krishna conscious. Because he was asked the question, just to be, politically correct nowadays. Of course, here we have a restaurant, which is very nice, the Holy Foods restaurant. So anyway, and so this devotee asked the question, is it all right to eat in restaurants run by people who are not Krishna conscious? And this person who was giving class said, it's all right. Basically, just paraphrasing what they said. But it's not all right. One of the points that Prabhupada made, and this is scientific, it's not simply a cultural item. One of the points that Prabhupada made in the beginning is don't eat food cooked by people who are not Krishna conscious, or who are not religious. And the reason is because the consciousness of the person cooking affects the food. Consciousness affects matter. When you think of a certain thing, it actually changes the molecular structure of that particular thing. It's interesting. It's not just some mystic thing like the power of the Force, There's a Star Wars example in it. It's my Maya. That, someone just says, oh, ooh, and I make someone rise up in the room in the middle of the class or something like that. That's not the point. When you have some particular consciousness, it affects, just like even with plants, if you have a particular type of consciousness, the plants will grow better or worse. Like if you play rock and roll music or whatever, for the plants, they don't grow. They just stunt. And you play Hare Krishna music, the plants grow so big. So it's consciousness. Consciousness affects matter. It definitely does. There's subtle laws of the universe. And so, therefore, that's why we don't eat food cooked by people who are not chanting Hare Krishna. Very simple. So, anyway, so by accepting things sent by his parents for his own personal welfare, his mind, I'm not saying his mind became polluted, but there's a potential if someone wasn't like a pure devotee, like Raghunath Das Goswami, and the mind becomes polluted. So Lord Chaitanya was very pleased. And then, of course, there was the whole eating process of Raghunath Das Goswami. In the beginning, he was eating the remnants of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After some time, he was begging from the Singadwara gate of the Jagannath temple. And eventually he gave that up. The reason he gave that up is because when one is begging for one's food, one naturally doesn't see people equally anymore. One sees people unequally. In other words, here's a sweet guy. I know him. He's going to give a nice donation today. I remember one time I went on Sankirtan with a devotee who was really expert and on Sankirtan, and he pointed out someone like 100 meters away. He said, here's a sweetie. Not a lady, but here's someone who's going to give me money. You're a sweet person. And I was thinking, of course, at Sankirtan may be useful to understand who's going to give you a donation. But at the same time, yastu sarvani bhutani atmana ivana pashyati. We have to see people equally, So it's very dangerous when you're taking money or taking anything for your own self that you see people differently. You understand? You'll want to go over, like a sannyasi, you want to go over people's houses and give bigger donations. Well, I should go over that person's house because he gives a lot. And that person's house? Nah, not today. So, anyway, so it disturbs the equanimity of the mind when one is, about the money situation. Also, that's why traditionally one should not get money for giving spiritual instruction, because it really, you can't give unbiased spiritual instruction if you're getting a salary for it. You understand? Because then you're thinking, well, if I tell this person the truth, they may not give me something. Subtly that may be going on in the mind. So it's very important, like Prabhupada talks about the people who make a living teaching Bhagavad Saptaha, the 7-day Bhagavatam thing. And they particularly dwell on the topics that are very sensual, like the Rasa Lila and other topics like that. So, anyway, Raghunath Das Goswami gave up begging, and then he just went to the kitchen, the special soup kitchen they had for beggars, for people who didn't have any money. And then, in order to become more renounced, just because he was thinking, I don't want to get infected again in this material world. And he wasn't infected. As I said, it was a pastime. This is a beautiful thing. That in order to become more renounced, what did he do? He took the rejected rice that even the cows wouldn't eat, that he just threw out, and he washed it with a little water, and that was his food. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and grabbed some of that rice. He said, you're keeping all this nice prasadam for yourself. Give me some. So he took a little bit, and Swarup Damodar Goswami, his personal associate, stopped him. He said, that's enough. And Lord Chaitanya said, this is real nectar. So the point is, prasadam is always real nectar. Just like when devotees want to take Mahaprasadam, generally they're thinking of the sweets. If you offer them and say, I would like some Mahaprasadam, okay, here's a chili pepper. Plate. You say, no, I want Mahaprasadam. In other words, they mean the sweet bowl. So, he was really careful about getting infected again. It's amazing. And even later on, when he went to reside in Radhakund, and he was arranging for all the different, let's say, kunds to be excavated, and all the different procedures, he didn't want to take anything in his own name. Because Radhakund, basically, it could have been in his name. Instead, he put it in the name of Srila Jiva Goswami. So he was so careful about this infection in the material world. One has to be extremely careful. Just like Bharat Maharaj, he had also given up everything in this world, but he wasn't extremely careful about getting reinfected. And he got reinfected by a baby deer. Can you imagine getting reinfected by a baby deer? That's wild. Why did you fall down from Krishna consciousness? Well, a baby deer came by. So that's why Prabhupada says, like a razor's edge. You have to be very, very careful. So here, the sons of Daksha are taking sannyas, and they are actually ready to take it, and they're careful. It's not premature, and all the accusations that Daksha is giving against Narada are completely inappropriate and wrong, because they are ready for renunciation. And they also renounced their father. Oh my God, I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that their renunciation was just like Raghunath Das's renunciation. They realized that their real father was Krishna and the spiritual master. So, any questions? Yes?
If a devotee has a restaurant and some cooks are devotees but some are not, should we also avoid food cooked?
Ask who prepared that preparation. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. One time I was GBC in a temple in Hawaii, and the devotees weren't so strict. I mean, that's an understatement. Really an understatement. I mean, basically the male pujaris had girlfriends and the female pujaris had boyfriends who came for the night. So I actually went to they have a restaurant there, it's also cooked, and then I would ask. Basically, I just ate the raw stuff. Anyway, hope that answers your question. Well, they had a nice salad bar, so it was all right. With sprouts and everything like that. So when in doubt, I just eat raw food. And another time I went to, I had a 10-day intensive seminar training in nonviolent communication, which I teach as empathic communication. And so I basically had to live with people who had not yet become Krishna conscious. I'm not saying demons, who had not yet become Krishna conscious, and we all had to eat together. And so there was a supermarket about 2 blocks away, so I just bought raw vegetables, yogurt. That time I was not a fanatic vegan. So yogurt, raw vegetables, avocado. I even made my own sprouts in my room. Sprouts. I just put them on the radiator, the heater. And 2 days the sprouts were there. And I had to eat with everybody, but I brought my own food. And also I had some devotee-made bliss bars with me, these little bars, and to share with everybody, and I gave to everybody. And so they were all, what it did is everybody was asking me about my diet, and it gave me a good preaching opportunity. Because in a situation like that, you can't just start distributing the books and, and tell everybody, you're in Maya, you're attached to your wife. You can't say any of that stuff. It's not like you're standing at Hare Krishna temple, I can say any damn thing and get away with it because I'm a sannyasa. But it gave me a preaching opportunity, and and I had my morning program. Actually, I took a walk, had my morning program, chanted my japa, and I was fine. So I found my own Krishna consciousness because I've been very careful. Even if I'm in a temple and I don't know who's cooking, then I won't eat. It's as simple as that. And when I go to the GBC meetings, this is really radical. You don't have to copy this. Let's say I go to a GBC meeting, and in many temples in India, they hire people to cook for the devotees. So I just bring a slow cooker or like a teapot or something into my room, and I just make some quinoa and vegetables. I'm pretty fanatic. So I went to one GBC meeting, where was it? Anyway, some GBC meeting somewhere in India. And the brahmacharis kept asking me, aren't you going to take prasadam? And I said, I actually thought I'd just play a joke. I said, I just live on air, I don't eat. So, 3, 4, 5 days went by and they never saw me eating. And the brahmacharis were just like, look, wow. He's a real yogi. I said, I'm a breatharian. It's not like I'm a vegetarian, vegan, everything. I'm a breatharian. I said, wow. Wow, he's a yogi. God bless you all. So I tend to be a little fanatic with it, but I'm a little eccentric. What can I do? So anyway, that's me. Actually, we have a question online by one of my disciples. Actually, a famous disciple. It's Gauramani Dasi. Wow. She has more disciples than me. So I'm envious of her. So the question is, why do devotees who preach and have dedicated their lives to Krishna become sick physically or even handicapped? Doesn't Krishna protect them? Isn't that protection stronger than any illness? Well, that's a good question. What does protection mean? Basically, protection means that Krishna is protecting your spiritual life. And as it's stated in the Bhagavatam, Yashaham Anugranami Harishe Tadanam Shanai. For those who I especially favor, and I'm praying that Krishna doesn't especially favor me, so I take away everything. That's pretty heavy, isn't it? I mean, in other words, don't worry about that verse. If you're attached to something, Krishna will make it. He'll take that away. But if you're able to use something in Krishna's service, like Prabhupada gave the example that he had children before he took sannyas, obviously. And now Prabhupada said that Krishna is giving him so many better children, thousands of children, devotees, who listen to him. Most children don't listen to their parents. But I didn't. So Krishna will take away things that are impediments. And sometimes Krishna will put his devotees, like he did with the Pandavas and Kunti, we've talked about this before, into difficulty. And so that they have to take shelter of Krishna. We talked about this last night, even the demigods, they're put into difficulty. Pure devotees are subjected to physical difficulty and so many times legal difficulty and other difficulties, so they have to chant, take shelter. Well, I mean, look what happened with Prabhupada in Mumbai. We're trying to get the hotel there, or it wasn't a hotel at that point, but trying to construct a hotel and trying to buy the land. I mean, it was so difficult, so much anxiety for Srila Prabhupada was there. Prabhupada got gored by a bull before he came to America. There's so many things. We cannot expect this material world to become pleasant. Just because you're a devotee doesn't mean that everything will be pleasant. The weather all of a sudden will be like nice and sunny all the time here, no cold weather, and you won't be freezing to death. Everybody will be nice to you. If that was the case, we become bewildered. So Krishna sometimes arranges devotees get sick if we put in unpleasant circumstances. Also, sometimes devotees make themselves sick by lifestyle choices. That's another issue. I mean, you can listen to my seminar on YouTube called Stop Killing the Devotees. Because of diet and lifestyle choices too. Like Prabhupada. Prabhupada had a heart attack in New York. He wasn't taking a morning walk before that time. But when a doctor came and examined him, of course the first thing the doctor said was, Swamiji, you chant too much. Prabhupada didn't take that advice. So we got to chant less. Prabhupada didn't do that. But he advised Prabhupada to walk for his health. And then every day after that, it became like a religious thing that Prabhupada took his morning walk, an aerobic walk every morning. Not yoga. He took an aerobic walk very fast that we couldn't keep up with Prabhupada. on a doctor's advice for his health. Prabhupada took a massage every day, roughly an hour or two of massaging every day. Kept one devotee, Shrutakirti, basically to massage him and cook for him. And so Prabhupada did take adequate measures. So that's one reason why he's undevoted. But even if we take adequate measures, sometimes there's sickness. Why do we get old? It's another question. Why, if I'm a devotee, sometimes I think, I've been serving you, Krishna, for 48 years, and look what you gave me, an old body. Why? Why are you so ungrateful? Why don't you give me don't give me a young body, because that means another birth. I have to be very careful what you ask Krishna for. I said, Krishna, make this body young again. But I don't want to even ask that, because that means desires come. So you got to be careful. Like you have, it's very interesting, you had Draupadi in her previous life asking Lord Shiva the wrong, inadvertently, accidentally, she was asking him for 5 husbands. Because Lord Shiva asked Draupadi in her previous life, what do you want? She said, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband, I want a husband. So you girls have got to be careful about that. And she got 5 of them. Lord Shiva said, you're going to get 5. She said, that's not what I meant. You asked 5 times. It's an interesting story. There was one of my disciples from Slovenia. She wanted a husband, so she did this Katyayani Vrat. And she got a husband right afterwards. It works. With the gopis, of course, they wanted Krishna, and they got Krishna, but the rest of you just want some smelly old guy, The material body, oh my God. I wouldn't do an austerity to get a smelly old body. Anyway, so apart from that sannyas comment. So this suffering is there in this world to remind us and to have us take shelter of Krishna. That's the real point. So we can't expect. And that's Krishna's protection. He protects us from Maya if we want to take that protection. If we really want Maya, there's nothing Krishna can do. We'll get it. Because Krishna does not interfere with free will. If we really want Maya. Like there's that story, Markandeya Rishi, he wanted to see Maya in the Bhagavatam. Markandeya Rishi, Krishna says, what do you want, Markandeya Rishi? And Markandeya Rishi says, I'd like to really see Maya. And Krishna said, he was thinking, not a good choice, but that's what he wants. Here we go. And then he got to see the water of devastation. He was floating in the water of devastation. And there were these big fish that almost ate him. And he was just, can you imagine, he was floating for how long? Do you remember how long it was? Like 6 kalpas. He lived for 6 kalpas, floating in the water. I like swimming, but not that much. So the poor guy was just, all these fish around, swimming. And then finally he comes to an island, and he sees a little boy on a leaf, on the tree, banyan leaf in the tree, and the little boy breathes in, and he gets sucked into his body, and then he sees the universe as it was before, and his ashram, and after a while he figures, Maya's not such a good thing. So if you really want it, you'll get it. But if you want to be Krishna conscious, then Krishna arranges things for you, sickness sometimes. But we have to take it in the right way. Suffering is there. This is the nature. And Gora says it's really heavy. Yep. It's heavy. It's heavy. Life is... you're all young. You think, this old guy, he doesn't know what life is all about. You'll experience. you experience. I mean, every day I get letters from disciples whose father had died, mother had died, they're sick. And, after this I'm going to Germany. I get several devotees to visit in the hospitals. There's one lady who's cancer. There's another man I have to visit who has cancer in the hospital. Seems like I spend a lot of time, either writing to people about people who have died or visiting people in the hospital. This is life. When you get older, you'll see that. This is life. Now you're thinking you got the whole life ahead of you, enjoyment. Isn't it? Harinam. I got everything. I got Harinam, a wife, prasadam. What else? A new car. What else?
Vacation.
A vacation, Croatia. Trip to India, the Holy Dham, Chai, Gauranga. So, you got the whole, you got the world in the palm of your hands when you're young. Just go here, there, then. Better to understand and serve the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Maharaj, why nowadays gurus are not so much renounced as described in the lecture?
Why gurus are not renounced like that? Well, I'm not going to criticize anyone else. I'll criticize myself. Because I'm in Maya. No. Why we're not renounced? Because it's called Yukta Vairagya. We have to use things in Krishna's service to carry out the mission. Like Prabhupada said, there was a conversation and where Prabhupada related, someone asked him, why do you use a car to go somewhere? And Prabhupada said, do you want, if I walked, how could I preach? So we're using things in Krishna's service. If someone is actually Krishna conscious, they don't need those things. They don't need their mobile phone. They don't need, probably they need a coat like this, but it's cold. I'm not going to walk around with a kopina and a little shawl around me here. I'm sorry. Don't ask me to be that renounced. So, also, we're in the Western world. We're not in the nice climate of India. It's not nice anymore. So we need certain things just to live for the sake of serving Krishna. And that's why you see the gurus may be, or I'm not speaking about myself because I can't say anything about myself. All I can do is criticize myself. But in general, the gurus may be just as renounced, but their renunciation is accepting things on behalf of Krishna, what pleases Krishna. Because real renunciation means to accept what's favorable for spreading Krishna consciousness. Now there's two types of renunciates. One is called the Bhajananandi and the other one's called the Ghostananandi. A Bhajananandi is someone who just sits and chants for his own benefit. So he can be externally appearing very renounced, whereas the Ghostananandi has to preach, so he has to accept things, like Prabhupada did. Prabhupada sometimes had a Rolex watch. I don't. I just have a cheap electronic watch. But Prabhupada had a Rolex watch and sometimes rings on his fingers. And devotees gave it to him. It's not that Prabhupada went to the jewelers and purchased jewelry for himself. The people gave him gifts. And, what can I do? I have to use glasses to read. I'm talking to people all over the world who are watching me at this point. Famous devotees like Gauramani. Oh my God. It gives me chills to realize that Gauramani is watching me. It's like having a famous personality, who would be a famous personality? Like some rock and roll star, or like having George Harrison watch you or something like that. So, I'm just joking. So any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. I would like to ask, what is Krishna's mercy actually? How to understand? I was thinking about this, what Krishna's mercy is, what I think it is. I thought it's like absence of material desires, that Krishna is enough for you. Something like this.
Krishna's mercy is to give you the association of a pure devotee. That's the manifestation of Krishna's mercy, and Krishna's mercy is the instructions that come from the Guru Mukha Padma Shlokya Chatuti Kodiyakya. And if you expect your material desires to go away like that, it doesn't work like that. One has to be immersed in pleasing Krishna, and then the material urges become so insignificant they're practically speaking non-existent. So you're the one who has to deal with your material desires. Actually, it's interesting, in the whole analysis of anarthas, referring to, it's interesting, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary on Krishna's pastimes, how each one of the demons represents a particular anartha. Certain anarthas have to be taken care of by one's own personal endeavor. You understand? So it's not that, I want your mercy, Krishna. Why do I still have desires? I have all these desires. Why haven't you taken away, give me your mercy? But mercy is instructions on how to do it. Isn't it? Krishna teaches us through the spiritual master how to take care of things. It's not like Krishna zaps you like some Mayavadi guru zaps the disciple. And, there's the typical story. Prabhupada tells the guru zaps the disciple, and the guru says, now I've given you everything, and I have nothing left for myself. But Krishna gives the devotee instructions. That's mercy. You have to follow them. Like if someone, I'll give you an example. If someone gives you a Christmas present, and there's instructions that go around. Because the funny thing is that this is a male thing, that men don't read instructions when they get that, isn't it? Women read instructions, but the men, when they get some present, they think they know better, and they try to put it together themselves, and they put the wheel on the top of the car or something like that. So Krishna gives us instructions, and he expects us to follow the instructions. You understand? That's mercy. Don't expect a free ride. I want your mercy, Krishna. Appear before me. No. Get to work, you bum. And, like Prabhupada said, deserve, then desire. Not that, Krishna, I want to see you under every bush like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Okay, I think it's time for prasadam, right? Oh, it's late. Okay, thank you everybody online for watching us. And thank you all not online. Here. Here's a viewpoint of everybody here. This is the youth temple. All young people, with a few exceptions. Few exceptions. We have a few token old people here.